Python. And Tim Peters is sort of the you know the one of the main originators of Python. And so here were some of his guidelines that he tried to keep in mind when he was making the programming language itself, and then also how it would be used. And so again, it's like you can write a code in many different ways to get the same answer. Oftentimes, it's like there'll be many different ways you can accomplish the same goal, but not all of them are as efficient necessarily or easy to understand. And so this is where in Python, we try to prioritize simplicity and ease of understanding. And so we won't read through all of those. You can read them on your own, but it's just kind of a neat little Easter egg. And it drives home this concept of your style is important, because if your code is not clear, then the person who has to maintain your code or reuse your code may have a very difficult time. And spoiler alert, often times that person is you. It might be you a year later trying to understand what your code does. So by using good style, you will be doing yourself a favor and definitely also doing the community a favor. So that's why style can be so important. So they have the PEP 8 style. So I'll just grab that from over here, programming style. And then it should also be in your learner notes when it's copied over. So this is the style guide. And it's very in-depth. It would take you a while to read it, and it's probably relatively dry. So I would not necessarily encourage you to, it definitely like have this as a reference, and you might browse it. But again, it's like keeping all of that in your, you only have so much working memory. So keeping all of that in your brain is not going to be easy. And then you're going to write your code as well, right? So that's why instead I would focus on finding a tool that will help you enforce good style. And so there's ways to do it in Jupyter, but it's not super straightforward. There are other ways with other IDEs like Visual Studio Code or Spider and these ones, where they'll have code checkers that will, and even some that will reformat your code for you on the fly as you're doing it. So, and there's also ones where you could just take a Python file and you could run it against something you install with pip, and it will check it for you. So that's getting those style checkers working is kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. Because again, where you want to end up doing your coding may vary. You may not want to stick to Jupyter. You may want to code from Notepad or your favorite IDE. So, but just be aware that there are these extensions that would allow you to then enforce the style. So you can do PEP 8. There are other styles as well, like Google has their own slightly different style. And again, depending upon if you certainly, good style is going to be a favor to yourself, even if you never share your code. But if you want to actually contribute to a community project, they're probably going to be much more stringent on enforcing that your code meets the standards. So again, the easiest way is to get a favorite IDE, and then someone suggested that you can get ChatGPT to enforce the standard on your code. And I am a fan of reaching out to ChatGPT for insights, because even if you can't just trust what it gives you, but it can certainly get you going a lot faster, and just be sure you test and check anything it gives you. But yeah, that's a good suggestion. So So again, there's all those things in there, but we will drive home a few items. And one is using doc strings. So and we can actually go back up here and we can apply a doc string to our adjust temperature, right? And so in the first position after we declare our function, we can do a string, and that string will become part of the documentation or help for the function. So in two ways, and we're going to use triple quotes so that we can do a multi-line string, because that's probably more realistic. You could do it all in one line, but putting all of your documentation on one line, if your documentation is significant at all, would be hard to read and maintain. So by using triple quotes, we can do a multi-line string, and we can say this function takes two integers. First one is temperature. The second is pressure. It returns the modified pressure. Actually temperature. Right. All right, so I'll run this again so that it actually takes effect. So now that is it's part of the documentation in a couple ways. One is because we can see the implementation, we can read it right there. But you could also then do help, adjust, and get it. So definitely that, and then also doing that, but also on each line, you can use the hashtag and you can put in more documentation. That's not going to show up in this help thing, but still, if you're actually going back and looking at the implementation, having more and more comments to help you remember what's going on and what's intended is always a good plan. So, or the other one we would like to drive home as a good idea is using what's called an assert statement in your code to check for edge cases and oddities, and then it will stop running the code and produce an error. So let's go ahead and do that again to this, rather than doing another function. Let's just modify this one. And let's say that our algorithm that we wrote, it actually doesn't work for temperatures that are less than 0, right? So you could actually do better error checking. Like if you know that about your code, you would probably do something where you're actually just checking the input and then giving back a better message. But if you definitely if you were sharing this code, I would say that. But if you're just coding for yourself and you just need quick checks to make sure that things are operating as intended, that's where assert can really shine. And so you could just say assert, and it's green, which means it's a Python keyword. And we could do t is greater than 0. And I think that's all we need. So I'm going to run this again so that it actually takes effect. And then if I do -30 or a -20, that's fine. it should error out and give me an error message. So you can see that this failed because t was less than 0. And so then it didn't just keep running. So again, it's not ideal for code that's going to be distributed and reused by other people. But if you're just doing quick checks for yourself, that's something you can add to your code to look for these edge cases and not just silently keep going when you know that it's going to end up doing something that you don't intend. Any questions about doc strings or assert statements? All right. Yeah. So we will do another challenge, and we'll and we'll just do 5 minutes for that. That should be adequate. Actually, if we could just get green reactions, we don't have to use all 5 minutes if everyone completes early. All right, if you need more time, please put up a red reaction. If not, we'll go ahead and start discussing. Okay, so it asked us several questions. So one, are there lines that should be made available and others that won't when we do help? So let's just go ahead and run this. And then, so this should be available for the help. And this, they still use triple quotes here, but this one won't be available, right? Or shouldn't be anyway. So I believe I did, yeah, I did run it. So if we do help, we can check that. So overall, so you can see it output this line, but not this line. So then it also asks us, will there any lines produce syntax error or runtime error? Okay, well, we ran it and it didn't produce an error. So that tells us that there are no lines that produce syntax errors. But what about runtime errors? Can anyone spot if there is a runtime error potential? There's at least one that jumps out at me. Anybody have a suggestion of what that might be? Anyone? So yes. So again, I'm not sure. There could be others because I didn't write this code and it's not super clear. Like I would actually probably have ChatGPT explain to me what it's trying to accomplish. But the one that Julia pointed out is the one I spotted, is that, well, we never defined edit distance. So as soon as it tries to run that function, it's going to be undefined. And so that's going to be the runtime error that will exist because we never defined it. Okay, good call. So that is, I believe, the end of the curriculum we have to cover. Are there any questions about the last challenge? And then beyond that, we can probably open it up to some overall questions. And then shortly after that, we will start our wrap up for the day.